All right, let's get into the next lesson. The title of this lesson is the Rapport Building Blueprint. And as the name says, we're going to be discussing this idea of creating rapport with women. A lot of what I'm going to be talking about in this video, although it's geared towards conversations in dates and pickup type environments, it's also stuff that you can use in other situations throughout your life, whether it be networking, your career, or just making friends. So this is really important stuff. I've been really honing in on this idea of rapport. Rapport is something that I've had like a love-hate relationship with my entire life. If you read the Small Talk Tactics report, you know that I heavily advise against getting too much rapport. Well, that is one way to look at it, but at the same time, rapport is crucial for your interactions with other people. And like I said, I have a love-hate relationship because my entire life I had a really hard time developing rapport with people outside of my comfort zone. And it's something that I've really been working on and really researching and going out there and testing and seeing what works in terms of being able to quickly create that sort of intense rapport that builds relationships. And through that, I kind of put together a rapport building blueprint that I wanted to discuss with you guys and walk you through today. But it's really going to lay a solid foundation for you on how to quickly establish rapport with just about anyone you're talking to. Now, in this, talk a lot about establishing rapport in regards to meeting more women and connecting with women. But rapport is something that kind of serves you well in all areas of your life. If you can quickly establish rapport with people, you're going to make friends a lot easier. You're going to obviously connect with more women, but you're also, if you're any kind of job where you're making sales or even where you're looking to get a promotion, you're going to get higher in your career and you're going to make more money. You're going to network more. You're going to meet more people. Rapport is just one of those things that separates the kind of people who are called connectors, who meet tons of people and always have people around them, and the people who don't. And I was one of the people who could not achieve rapport for the longest time, and that's why I worked so hard, and I still work so hard at figuring out how to do it. And in this video, I wanted to lay out 3 different areas. I wanted to talk first about strategy. I'm going to talk a little bit about the mindset going into an interaction in regards to creating rapport. Then I'm going to go over some specific tactics for quickly creating rapport with anyone you're talking to. And then I'm going to talk about the obstacles that you may face when you're trying to establish rapport with somebody. So first, let's get into strategy. Let's talk a little bit about the strategy. So, what you're going to be doing first is you're going to be establishing the framework of the conversation. As we've discussed previously, you can't create attraction with a woman without having a conversation with her. Not real attraction. I mean, she can see you and think you're good looking or whatever. But to create that really strong vibe and that really strong attraction, it's going to take place within the context of a conversation. So your conversation is the frame now that this rapport is going to take place in. The first thing you want to do in that conversation is find some kind of mutual interest. What you're looking for is a common ground, something that you both like. This usually happens early on in the conversation when you're talking about maybe like what kind of music you like, or you're talking about what college you went to. It's just something where you can say, hey, I like that too. Now, when you're doing that, though, a lot of people ask factual-based questions, and they'll say something like, so, what kind of food do you like? And the girl's like, oh, I like McDonald's. And you're like, I like McDonald's too. And you think that that's bonding, but that's not really the rapport kind of questions you want to be asking. What you want to be asking is more opinion-related questions, and you also want to be asking open-ended questions. you want to get her opinion about things, not like a fact of like where did she go to college. You want to know what did she like most about college. So if she says, I went to USC, and you said, oh, I went to USC 2 years ago, yeah, you kind of have a mutual bond there. But if you're talking to her and she says, I went to USC, and you say, oh, what did you like best about it? And she's like, oh, the parties were great. And then you're like, oh, yeah. And then it opens up a bigger type of rapport. And the same token, you want to ask open-ended questions. You don't want to ask her a question that she can answer and then leave it at that. You want to kind of dig her feelings out of the questions. Now, what you also want to be doing is looking for hooks. A hook is something that you can tell she enjoys talking about. So if you're talking to her and let's go back to the USC example, and she says, oh, I went to USC, I like to party, and you start talking to her a little bit more, and she starts telling you how, at the party she liked to dance, and you start saying, oh, you like to dance, and then all of a sudden she says, you see her eyes light up, and she starts talking about how ever since she was a little girl, she's loved dancing. Now, in that case, you got a hook. So you don't want to just dismiss that. You want to dig a little bit deeper into that. Now, the problem with that, digging deeper in, is when you're establishing rapport right here, is you want to establish deep and wide rapport. What I mean by that is, okay, if she starts talking about how much she likes dancing and you can kind of relate a little bit to dancing, you don't want to dwell on dancing forever. You don't want the entire conversation to be about how both of you like dancing. If you read the Small Talk Tactics report, you read how I made that mistake when I started talking to a girl and I found out that she was into health food, and at the time I was really into like healthy eating and vegetarianism, and we started talking about that at the party, and the entire conversation was me and her talking about health food. So in that case, we went deep. We had deep rapport on one topic. What you want to do is you want to create deep and wide rapport, which means you want to find rapport on multiple topics. You don't want to just stop on dancing. You want, when you talk a little bit about dancing, you want to get deep on dancing because you know that it was something that she was passionate about, but then you want to find other hooks. When you want to maybe branch off when she's talking about dancing, say, oh, what was the favorite place you went dancing, or were you ever in any recitals? And then she says, oh yeah, I actually was in Florida for a cheerleading contest where I had to dance. And then you can kind of maybe switch it to Florida and kind of feel her out and see if there's anything in there that kind of piques her interest. And if there is, bond on that as well, instead of just honing in solely on one topic. Now, what you want to avoid is topics that you sense her kind of irritating her, or maybe you notice that she closes up a little bit or she rolls her eyes when you mention it. When you sense that she doesn't want to talk about something, just drop it, just move on, glance over it, and forget that you even ever brought it up. It's not a big deal. She'll forget about it. You don't want to pressure her into talking about something that she's obviously not interested in. Now, the second strategy is calibration. And what calibration means is that every situation you go into when you're trying to develop rapport with somebody, every situation is different. And there's two different things that determine how you should be going for rapport. One is the type of girl you're dealing with, and the second is the outcome that you're looking for. So as far as the type of girl, what I mean by this is certain girls you're going to need more rapport with, and certain girls you're going to need less rapport with. So if you're out at, let's say, a club and you meet this wild club girl and she's having, she's dancing and you're talking to her a little bit and she's kind of dancing and bouncing around, you're not going to go for really strong rapport with her. You don't need it. You need to go more for attraction, create a little bit of rapport, but go more into the attraction phase. On the other hand, let's say you're talking to sort of like a spiritual girl, a little quieter, more reserved. You might need to go deeper into rapport, establish a more of a bond on different topics and different situations than you would with the party girl. The other thing you want to keep in mind is what outcome are you going for? Because the amount of rapport you need depends on what you want out of the situation. For instance, if you're just looking to get a girl's phone number, you're out on the street, you're walking quick, you stop, you chat with her a little bit, and you just want to get her phone number to continue the conversation a little later, you don't have to get a ton of rapport. Same thing if you're just you want to ask her out and you're talking to her on the phone for a minute and you called her and now you're on the phone with her and you're trying to make a connection. You don't have to go deep into the rapport right then because you have more time later on. However, if you're trying to get her back to your place, or you want to kind of hook up right on the dance floor, if you want to, get really physical with her on the quicker side, she's going to expect a little bit more rapport. She's going to have to feel a little bit more comfortable with you. She's not going to come back to your place unless she has some sense of rapport, particularly a strong sense of rapport. So that's what you're looking for in terms of how to gauge and calibrate to the amount of rapport you want. It depends on the girl. Stereotype her a little bit. You don't want to go crazy, and not all girls are the same. Just because she's a party girl doesn't mean she's not going to want rapport. But the situation you're in, is it appropriate to go for too much rapport? Like I said, I keep going back to the story from the Small Talk Tactics report because I'm assuming most of you have read it, but if you haven't, I was at a party and I was going for a lot of rapport, and on a topic that wasn't related to the party. The girl that I was going for that rapport with wound up excusing herself to go to the bathroom and meeting another guy in 20 minutes, giving him a hand job. And here I was talking to an hour before, continuing to build the rapport. The amount of rapport I was going for wasn't necessary, especially because the girl wasn't even necessarily a girl that I was super into to the point where I wanted to make her my girlfriend, and I needed to establish that much rapport. So just remember to calibrate the situation. Remember the type of girl she is and the outcome you want. So to review the strategy is you're establishing a framework, and that framework is the initial connection. What do you initially connect on? What is the first thing that you both like where you can say, oh, me too? And what you're looking to do in that situation is you're looking to ask open-ended, opinion-related questions. You're looking to find hooks that, things that she enjoys talking about, and try to create the rapport around those things. Avoid things she doesn't like talking about, and go deep and wide with the rapport. As you start to create rapport, go deep and wide. That means if you see something that she's into, and go it a little deeper, but then bring it wide and branch out into other things. Don't solely talk about, health food like I did. Don't just stick to that topic of health food. When you sense that the girl, and you went a little deep on health food and you both like it, move on to something else that you both have in common. So that is the framework and the calibration and the strategy you have going in. Let's get into some topics, some tactics. Alright, so let's talk about some of the tactics you're going to use once you've mapped out your strategy, once you know what outcome you want. These are the things you're going to do within the context of the conversation to keep that bond growing, to keep that rapport increasing. And what you'll find is when you get good at the tactics that I'm going to talk about, when you really master these tactics, you can create rapport extremely quickly. And the quicker you create rapport and that comfort, the easier it is to get that instant attraction, because she already feels comfortable with you and she lets her guard down. She takes that wall, that barrier that she has up, down. And once that barrier comes down, it is a lot easier to get in there and start building the attraction. We're not going to be talking primarily about attraction building techniques today, but we're going to be talking about the tactics that create that almost instantaneous rapport. So the tactics that we're going to be discussing first is active listening. And with active listening, your whole job is to just get that out of her head, that you're only there to to try to pick her up, because that's what a girl's thinking. Oh God, another guy trying to pick me up. And a guy who's trying to pick her up generally is going to be spewing things out. He's going to be trying to win her over, trying to show her how much, how cool he is. And when she's talking, he's going to be fighting for a chance to talk, and he's going to be trying to tell his stories and weasel in there. And all those things are all right. There's nothing wrong with, being the guy talking. I've talked about the 90-10 rule, where chances are you're going to have to be doing a lot of talking. But when the girl is talking, when she's the one talking, you want to be actively listening. And I'm going to go over some ways that you can actively listen. The first is, don't react when she's talking. When she's talking, just listen. Just sit back and wait and listen to her whole message. Most guys, when a girl's talking, they get so excited to connect with something she said that they barely even let her finish her sentence. And that just comes across as try hard, like you're forcing the rapport. What you want to do is you want to sit back, let her say everything she's going to say, and then when she finishes, kind of react to everything she said. And what that does is it makes her think that you really were listening. And the whole idea of, you want her to think she's winning you over. Not that you're trying to win her over. You want her to think that she's winning you over. So the next thing you can do is amplify. And what you're doing with amplifying is you're repeating back to her, showing her that you understand her. So if she says something to the extent of, she had a lot of fun today. Earlier in the day she went for a jog earlier in the day, and it was a really good jog, and it was a nice day, and she's telling you about it. Say, oh man, yeah, isn't it just amazing to go out and get exercise on a nice day? You just feel so alive. You're just amplifying that good state that she's bringing in. On a similar note, echoing is something that is kind of similar to it, is where you're repeating the main point that she said in different wording. So if she says, oh, I had a great trip this weekend. I went on a trip this weekend to Mexico. It was so great, but it's good to be back. You can say something like, oh yeah, it just feels so good to be home sometimes, doesn't it? You're just showing her that you understand her, and that you're just echoing back what she says, and it kind of creates that feeling of like, oh, this guy knows me, he understands me. And going further into that idea of showing her that you understand her is empathy. Empathy is when you basically say to the person without saying it, you say, I understand how you feel. And how you do that is you state the emotion that you imagine she was feeling during a situation. You don't necessarily comment on the situation, but you state how you would imagine she would have felt. So if she's telling you a story about her roommate leaving her, that her roommate bailed out on her and left her to pay the entire rent, and she didn't give her any notice, and now the landlord is knocking down her door, and she's so mad at her roommate, and she couldn't believe it. Don't insult the roommate. Comment on how she would feel. You say something like, oh, you must have felt so betrayed. You must have felt so lost and betrayed that somebody would do that. You're just showing her that you can imagine how she would feel. Another way to show empathy is to comment on how she feels about something in particular. For instance, if she's telling you about music and she's talking about a song that she really likes, say, wow, you really are passionate about music, aren't you? Because now, if music's something she is passionate about, you're showing her that you can kind of look at her and determine what she's thinking, and you can relate to her and kind of understand her. So, to actively listen, what you're doing is you're not reacting right away. You're amplifying and echoing back things she's done. You're showing empathy. And then the final thing is captioning. Captioning is when you feed back phrases from her story or experience. if she's telling you something earlier on in the night, later on you bring it back up. It could be a joke. It works really well for jokes where it's like callback humor, where if you remember something funny that she did, you can bring it back later. But it also works for building rapport, because if she told you a story earlier about how, let's say, she won a contest in high school for her writing ability, that she won, she's telling you can tell she was really proud how she won this prestigious contest. And then later on, now you guys are talking, and let's say you're talking about online dating profiles, and she's telling you how she went on an online dating site. You say something like, "Oh, your profile must have been great, since you had won that contest. I assume you're a really good writer." So not only there did you show her that you were listening earlier and that you're relating it to her, but you're also bringing up a positive self-image that she has of herself. She likes that. It's like we all like it when somebody reminds us of something that we did, a positive quality about us. Think about how you feel when there's something you're proud of and somebody reminds you of it later, like they were listening and they remembered it. It's just a good feeling. We're all humans, and we all share that same sense of pride in the things, in our accomplishments, and we love when other people recognize them. So that's active listening. Let's talk about the next tech. The next tactic for building rapport quickly is mirroring. Mirroring is, you can do it in two ways. What you're doing here is you're showing her almost a reflection of herself or what's going on. You can do it with trance words. So with trance words, you're looking for the words that she uses to describe feelings and things that she likes. And then you start using those words. So using Paris Hilton as an example, if you remember a few years back when she was all over TV and on all the talk shows, she used the word hot a lot. Anything she was talking about, she would use hot. Like, oh, that's hot. Oh, yeah, that song is hot. That car is hot. So if you're talking to Paris Hilton and you want to describe the new guitar you just bought, you can say, oh, I just bought the hottest guitar. Or, I went to the concert I went to was so hot. You're just using the words that she uses, and generally people use words that their friends use. Everybody kind of picks up the little slangs that their friends use. So by using that word that she's using, chances are that's the words her friends use too. So you're kind of showing her that you're her friend, that you're in that same group with her. Another way to do that is pacing, and pacing is a little different. Pacing is when you pace her reality. So you're basically pointing out to her what's going on. Sort of like you're bringing up the elephant in the room, but not really, because you're not talking about a bad thing. Like, say you're at a coffee shop and you guys start talking in line at the coffee shop, and you both get your coffees, and now the conversation continues, and now you're kind of talking, sitting at a little table. What you could say to her to pace her reality is you'd say something like, it's funny, we're two strangers in a coffee shop and we're telling each other all these deep things. What you just did right there is you're just showing her what's going on. You're like the mirror of, hey, see, this is what we're doing. We're two strangers and we're telling each other these things, these intense things, and you're just bringing that to light. So you can use trance words. Like I said, you're using a word that is in her vocabulary that you can tell is probably a word that her and her friends use. And then pacing is you're bringing into light the obvious. You're bringing up the elephant in the room and showing her exactly what's going on. The next tactic is something I call unmasking. And it's one of my favorite tactics. I've talked a little bit about this in the past. I know I brought it up in the Chameleon report I sent out almost last year maybe. And it's something I always want to talk more about, but I just never get around to it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about it now. It's extremely, extremely powerful. It is probably one of the most powerful things here if you know how to do it right. The whole idea of unmasking is you're showing the woman that you're human, that you have a life outside of this bar, that you have feelings and emotions, and you have this whole other side. Because most people, when they're out in a bar or in a social situation, they wear a mask. I refer to it as the social mask, and it's really like uncomfortable. It's like wearing a really tight, annoyingly itchy sweater, and you hate wearing it, but you're just sort of forced to wear it because everybody else is. When you're with your friends, you can take it off, and that's why we like hanging out with our friends so much, because we don't have to put on that act. I mean, think about it. Like, have you ever been with a close friend, and you guys are just having a good time, and then somebody else comes into the group who's not on the same closeness of you as the two of you, and then it just gets weird because you guys have to go back to putting the mask on. You have to go back to that like more formal, structured way of communicating. Well, unmasking is taking your mask off in a calculated way to get her to take her mask off too. And once that comes off, that's when real communication takes place. That's like almost simulating the effect of friendship, of knowing somebody forever. And there's different ways you can do this. The first way is by showing her you're human and that you share the same human experiences, the same childhood, that you came and you have shared human experiences. One of the ways I like to do this is, you make comments about things that she'll remember. I've always said one of the best topics of conversation is childhood memories, and a way to do this or is to say, you're talking about cereals, and then you start arguing with her about what's a better cereal, Count Chocula or Frankenberry. And then, you kind of talk about that, and then you talk about, when you were a little kid, your favorite cereal was Raisin Bran, or whatever, or Trix, or Cocoa Puffs, and you like the toy that you got inside. You're just showing her that you're a human, that you're not just this creepy guy that she's met out on the street. You can also make a comment, and show cool vulnerability, and that childhood idea is another way to show cool vulnerability. And like, cool vulnerability is admitting that you still watch cartoons on Saturday mornings sometimes. Cool vulnerability is telling her something about yourself that kind of lets her in a little more than you should have let her in. Letting her know something that's slightly embarrassing. It's a way to show her cool vulnerability is by telling her an embarrassing story about yourself, where you look kind of cool. An example that I've used recently, something that actually happened to me, was I was driving in my car, and I was in a good mood. I'd come back from the gym or something, and like when it's a nice day and you're just feeling good, and the music's playing, and you're just kind of singing along. Well, I'm driving, and the Madonna song "Lucky Star" comes on. You might be my lucky star, old Madonna song, whatever. I'm just in a good mood. I turn it up and I start singing it. I'm like fucking rocking out to it. And I pull up to a red light and I'm not even paying attention. I'm rocking out. And I turn to my right and there's this like hot chick and she's looking at me like I have 3 heads and I'm kind of humiliated. And I kind of did one of those things where you just don't look at her just because if you don't look, it didn't happen sort of thing. So I just kind of drive away. Well, that's like one of those embarrassing moments that happens, but most people don't really talk about it, especially with a stranger. But that's the kind of story. That's the kind of story you would tell a girl. You would just say, "Oh yeah, this morning I was at, earlier in the day, it was so embarrassing. I was at the street and I'm singing," and you even get into it. Do the gestures of singing in the Madonna song, and that's the kind of cool vulnerability you want to be showing. It's not, you don't want to be going into like therapy and telling her how you were beat when you were a little kid or how you had an imaginary friend because all the kids picked on you. Like, that's too far. You want to tell stories about your childhood or embarrassing stories that you still come out looking cool, but you're letting her glimpse a side of you that usually only your friends see. So that is the concept and tactic of unmasking. And if you haven't really know what this is something that I highly, highly recommend digging a little further into because it's powerful. It is extremely, extremely powerful. All right, the next thing you want to do is likeness. And what you're doing here is you're just showing her that you approve of her. You're giving her an approval. You're showing her that you like her, that you approve of her. You're not going overboard here. You don't say, I like you, or you're so cool, or any of that shit. What you're doing is just basically giving her the okay. And the best way to do this is through an indirect compliment. An indirect compliment is when you compliment something about her, but not necessarily her. So, for instance, if you had been talking to her and she told you how she went backpacking across Europe, you can say something like, "You've backpacked across Europe? Wow, adventurous women are so cool." So you're basically saying she's cool, she's adventurous, but you're not coming out and saying it. And really what you're doing there is you're just giving her an approval, and you're the one judging her, which is always the way you want to be, but at the same time, people like to feel liked, and we like those who like us. It's just true. If we hear that somebody likes us, it makes us like them a lot more. The next tactic is something that we talk about. We talk about all these tactics in Conversation Escalation, the upcoming course program that I did with 5 of the top pickup artists in the world. We do talk about a lot of them, but in one of the sessions, one of the modules, we talk a lot about cold reading. And cold reading can be extremely, extremely powerful. It's something when you get it and when you nail cold reading, it's like this weapon that you can pull out at any time and create this sense of wonder in a woman, and really helps nail down that rapport. Now, what you're doing in cold reading is you're just telling a woman statements, making statements, general statements even, that, personalize her, that you personalize them towards her, and you make a statement about her personality through them. And cold reading is really powerful because if you can correctly tell a woman something about herself, it is profound to her. She'll feel like she's known you so well, and she'll wonder how you can read her mind even, and how you can kind of develop this about her. And it's not that hard to do, because the thing with cold reading is you're generally using general statements that apply to 99% of the women out there. But women love this stuff, and they want to believe that it's them. And we also, even guys, we like to see how other people view us. We like to know how other people are viewing us. So when you do that, it's a great way to not only give a woman a chance to see how you view her, but it's also a way to show her that you know her as good, or if not better, than she knows herself. And when you're able to the best way to do this is by, I'm gonna give you an example of something you can say, just so you have an example. Is say if you're talking to her and she's telling you something, you can say, listening to how you say that, I can see that you're someone who sees the world through emotions rather than facts and logic. Now, that's something that applies to most women, but just saying it to her, she's going to think, and she's like, wow, that's true. I do see things through emotions, and she's going to get all into it. Now, there's a handful of cold reading things. In the Conversation Escalation program, we talk about a lot of different lines to use and different common cold reads, and if you order the program, I even have a free cold reading report that I give, where I give a ton of the free cold reading lines and reads that you can use based on, I've read a ton of books on cold reading by some of the top people in the industry. And, if you use these, they're generally going to work. But, that being said, you also want to learn how to cold read on your own. You want to be a people watcher. You want to be somebody that observes people and is able to really figure things out on their own. It's not that hard because people fall into categories and stereotypes, like I said earlier, And once you kind of can stereotype a girl into a certain category, you can figure a lot of things out about her really quickly. I do this with my girlfriend a lot. I can explain what's in her mind better than she can think it sometimes, because I watch her and I know how she's going to react to a situation, and I know what's going to bother her, and I know what she's thinking and why she's thinking it. And, between the two of us, it's created an extremely, intense rapport that she feels, because I can understand her problems better than she can think it. You know how powerful that is when somebody's feeling something and they can't put it into words, but you can? And the more you observe people and pay attention, the more you'll be able to do that. The next, and it's often said one of the more powerful tactics, is nonverbal. All the previous ones we've used, active listening, mirroring, unmasking, liking, cold reading, they all sort of involve the back and forth conversation between the two of you. Nonverbal is everything but the words that are coming out of your mouth. One of the techniques is matching. And what you're doing with matching is you're adopting the girl's tone of voice, the tempo she's using, the body language that she has. And what this does is it puts her at ease. It's just kind of, you get in the same rhythm as her, and she gets in the same rhythm as you. And if you ever watched two people who know each other really well and who are talking, they have that same rhythm. They're at the same sync, the same level, the same energy. Everything just flows together. So, and that's what we're used to on an unconscious level. When we're with our friends, that's what's going on, that syncing of energy. And normally when we're with somebody we don't know well, that energy is off. Either one person has more energy or less energy than the other person. So by matching it, you're kind of creating the illusion that you have known her for a while and that you're on the same energy level. Mirroring is similar to matching, but in this case what you're doing is you're imitating her posture, her gestures, her eye contact. So if she takes a sip of her beer, a second later, you take a sip of your beer. You don't want to do it too quick, though, because then she thinks you're just, imitating her. But, maybe 2 or 3 seconds later, you take a sip of your beer, and if she kind of slouches down, you kind of slouch down. And you do this quick enough, and then you get in that rhythm, and now you can eventually start to lead her and kind of bring her to where you want her to go. If you want to pick up the pace, you start upping your energy, and she'll follow you. It's weird. I don't know what it is. It's kind of that same logic of women who live in a house together get the period at the same time. I don't know how it works or why it works, but it does work, and it's a way to create rapport really quickly with somebody because, like I said, matching and mirroring is what we do with our friends naturally. When we're with somebody that we've known forever, just watch how you're with them. You both sit the same way. You both kind of have the same posture and gestures as you're talking to each other. And by doing that, you're creating that illusion that you've known the person forever. So just to review the different tactics, we have active listening, where you're just showing her that you're really paying attention to what she's saying. Mirroring, not in the nonverbal way, but in the verbal way of using the words that she uses and then kind of verbally pacing her reality, talking about the situation that's happening. Unmasking, which we talked a lot about, is displaying that human side of you, that cool vulnerability. And you can do that through telling stories that show you in an embarrassing situation or a more human side of you. Likeness, which is where you're just giving her an indirect compliment, just letting her know that you approve of her. Cold reading is something that we just finished talking about, where you're gauging her personality and telling her things about herself she might not have known. And nonverbal is when you're using her body language, her posture, her tone of voice to connect with her. So those are the tactics you're going to be using to develop rapport with somebody. Now, the things that you're going to run into, the obstacles, these are the things that mess a lot of guys up, because even when you know all these tactics, when you know how to active listening, you know how to mirror, you know how to unmask, you know all this, you still might run into some problems. I'm going to show you and walk you through how to overcome these obstacles. The first obstacle is awkward silences, and I think if you asked any guy what scares him the most out of a conversation, it's not getting a drink thrown in his face, it's not having a girl slap him, it's not having a boyfriend interrupt, it's awkward silences. For some reason, we fear the hell out of awkward silences, and I know I did. And the thing is, we make them awkward, and that's what's strange about it, because when you're with your friends, your close friends, silence isn't awkward. I mean, I've been in the car with friends of mine for like 20 minutes sometimes, where we're just in our own minds thinking about stuff, and we don't find it awkward. Yet, if I was on a first date with a girl and we were driving for 10 minutes without saying a word to each other, it would be awkward, extremely awkward. So let's talk about some of the ways to diffuse awkward silences. The first way to diffuse awkward silence is through the use of humor. And in that case, sort of like we talked about earlier with the pacing, with this you're calling out the elephant in the room. So for instance, if both of you have stopped talking and there's sort of that uncomfortable silence, just say, "Wow, that was pretty uncomfortable, huh? One of us needs to say something quick." And you just make a joke about it, like, "Wow, this is pretty awkward." And you're just, by saying it, that you let the tension out of the situation. And the tension is what causes the awkwardness. It's not the silence. It's that, like, tension of, oh, who's going to say something? Oh, my God, we're dying out. We have nothing to say to each other. But simply acknowledging it and making a little joke about it, it releases that tension. And then you can just sort of go on and talk and laugh and have a good time together. The second way to diffuse an awkward silence is to change locations. So, if you're talking to a girl and you start to run out of steam and you sense that you're running out of things to say and you're standing by the bar, you can say to her, "Hey, let's go outside and get some fresh air." And as you're walking outside, you're changing environments and you're seeing new things. New things will pop in your head to talk about. You can just as easily say, "Hey, I want to go introduce you to somebody," and go maybe bring her to your friend. Just think about how you can change the location of whatever you're doing. And that usually works to have some new conversation pop in your head and to diminish the awkward silence. The last thing is canned responses. And what you're doing with a canned response is you have something ready that you say in all the situations where you can have an awkward silence. Something ready, something that changes the topic of the conversation. And if you're going to do it, you may as well do it to change it towards something that is on a deeper level. And the whole way you do this is you almost, when the silence comes and you start running out of things to say, you almost make it seem like you're taking a minute to say this. And you want to say something that is a little profound or a little intriguing. So as you're running out of things to say and you kind of stall out, stop, catch your breath, and say to her something along the lines of, "So, I was wondering, are you always this nice to strangers, considering we just met?" Or, "So, what were you thinking when I came and approached you? What was your first opinion of me?" See how you use that silence not as an awkwardness, but as a way to, take the conversation to a deeper level. You're kind of talking about the situation and giving her a chance to talk about it. And we all love analyzing what's going on and talking about the unsaid. So those are the three best ways to diffuse awkward silences: humor, changing location, and canned responses. The next common obstacle is when the woman is really closed off, like you just can't seem to get her to open up. So let's talk about some of the ways you can get a woman to open up who might not be. First off is make sure that you're opened up yourself. A lot of times you may be giving off a closed off vibe. I know that I did that when I was really analyzing myself and working on this. I used to ask people's opinions of me, and a lot of people said that I gave off the vibe that I didn't want to be talking to them. And I never thought that. I thought, oh, why are these women not opening up? But from their point of view, I wasn't opening up. So what you want to do is make sure that you're opening up. Be clear that you yourself are open, that you're not sitting there giving off a vibe of being closed. If you are open, the first thing you could do is comment on her closed offness. So, for instance, if she's sitting there and she's got her arms crossed and she just not really seems to be she doesn't really seem to be too comfortable around you. She seems closed off and not opening up to you. Just say something to the extent of, "Wow, you're pretty quiet. You always like this?" And you're just bringing it out into the open. You can also ask her a question. That's similar to the comment, but a question you can say, "Hey, if you notice she's got, let's say, her arms folded and she's got a really closed off body language. Her arms are folded around her chest. You can say, 'Hey, you cold?' And then she'll be like, 'Oh,' and she'll look down and she'll notice that her arms are folded. And, that tends to loosen her up sometimes. So you can either comment on it somehow, question her about it. But the first thing you want to do is make sure that you're opened up yourself. Okay. The final obstacle that you run into, and this is what I ran into if you read the Small Talk Tactics report, is too much rapport. And we probably experienced that. We were talking to a girl, and she starts telling you too much. She starts talking about her boyfriend, or in my situation with the girl where I had too much rapport over health food, she started telling me I reminded her of her dad, and that. Then she was talking to me. We were talking about fiber supplements, and she actually said they make her shit. And when a girl tells you that something makes her shit, she's gotten too comfortable with you, and she's not worried about attraction anymore. So if you sense that she's getting too comfortable, there are two things you can do. One is humor. You can use humor to diffuse the situation. So if you sense that she's gotten too comfortable, you can just say something along the lines of, let's say she's talking about her ex-boyfriend and she's going on and on about it. Say, if you keep doing this, I'm going to have to start charging $200 an hour for this. Make a joke about you not being her psychiatrist or something along those lines. She'll usually get the point, You don't have to be mean about it, but she'll usually get the point. The other thing you can do is just be blunt about it. So if she's talking about something and, let's say she's talking about her work, and she starts bitching about her boss, and she's like going on and on about her boss, and, you just sense she's getting too comfortable. She's looking at you almost like this too much of a friend, too much of a nice guy. Just be blunt and say, "Hey, listen, I really don't want to talk about this anymore. We're at a bar. Let's have fun tonight. Let's not talk about this." And you just straight out tell her, "I don't want to talk about this." And usually she'll get the point, and she'll realize, wow, I wish that the girl did that to me when I was talking to her about health food at the party at the frat house. I wish that she had just said, "I don't want to talk about this anymore." Or I wish that I had thought to say, "I don't want to talk about this anymore," because neither one of us did, and we kept talking about it until she disappeared to give another guy a handjob. So, those are the three biggest things: the awkward silences, the woman not being closed off, and too much comfort. Those are your main obstacles to rapport, and if you can overcome those three things, you can establish rapport using these tactics and the strategy I talked about to achieve rapport with just about any woman. Now, rapport is only the first half of the battle. The first thing you want to do is establish attraction, but you need rapport. And the thing about rapport is that it's something that lasts. When you create rapport with somebody, the first time you meet them, you can pick up that rapport fairly quickly the next time if you establish it good enough. This is something one of my friends does really well that I've always admired and haven't been able to do, is he meets somebody for like 30 seconds, establishes the rapport with them, and then he'll meet them again like 2 weeks later, and he'll pick right back up at that rapport without even thinking about it. And when you get really good and you know what you're doing and you're establishing a rapport pretty quickly, it works real well because let's say you meet a girl in a class and you established a rapport with her, and then you don't talk to her that much that day. Then you see her a week later on campus. You can pick up that rapport right away with her and then move on to a different tactic and strategy. You know, your strategy might be the same, but let's say the first time you talked to her, you know, you active listened and you told a little embarrassing story about yourself and you developed a little bit of rapport. The next time you're talking to her, you can bust out some more of these tactics. Maybe you do a little cold reading. Maybe you start to verbally pace her reality. Now she's met you twice and she's starting to feel like, wow, this guy, I feel like I've known him forever. And the beauty about that is that even if it didn't work out with that girl, you're now a guy that she feels really comfortable with and the kind of guy that she wants to bring around her friends, the kind of guy she would feel comfortable setting her friend up with. Now if you're out and you see her with friends, you're going to fit right into her group because by having that rapport with her, it's going to pretty much translate into rapport with most of her friends as well. So, this is the rapport building blueprint